BHR Partners, a largely Chinese state-backed firm where Hunter Biden served as a director, has been investing in and acquiring sensitive technologies of interest to the Chinese regime. China is set to ban exports of certain goods and technologies to protect, as it claims, its national security. But is it going to have a similar effect as the U.S. sanctions? The U.S. designated 6 more Chinese media outlets as foreign missions. It's to differentiate between news written by a free press and propaganda distributed by the Chinese Communist Party. Sweden banned gear by Chinese telecoms companies Huawei and ZTE, and the U.S. stepped up an offensive to keep Huawei out of Brazil's 5G market. And the United Nations will locate its first big data center in China. The UN representative who signed the agreement is also Chinese. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. BHR Partners, a private investment fund, has been in the news a lot lately. This as Hunter Biden's business dealings in China and Ukraine have come under close scrutiny, as his father runs for the presidential office. Some of the dealings are detailed in emails recently obtained by the New York Post and a Senate report. But many have already been reported by the media in the past.
Investigation this morning into Joe Biden's son Hunter and questions about money he made from foreign business dealings while his father was vice president.
And Hunter's tithe with BHR is one of them. So what exactly is this company and what's Hunter's role in it? Hunter remained a director of BHR until late last year. His lawyer said he didn't receive compensation for the position. A Financial Times report shows that BHR listed an investment firm as a shareholder that owned 30% of the fund. Other shareholders of the firm include major Chinese state-owned banks and local governments. In July 2014, the Wall Street Journal reported that the fund had raised $1.5 billion, citing a Bank of China spokesperson. According to a New York Times report, in 2017, Hunter bought a 10% stake of the fund through a company he owns at the price of $420,000. BHR Partners have been found to invest in and acquire sensitive technologies to the interest of the Chinese regime. One example is that in September 2015, BHR jointly acquired American automotive company Henniges. BHR's joint acquirer is a subsidiary of China's defense company Aviation Industry Corporation of China, or AVIC. AVIC holds 51% of the automotive company and BHR the remaining 49%. AVIC is on the Pentagon list of companies that are controlled by the Chinese military. It's a major military contractor for the People's Liberation Army. It has been accused of stealing technologies from U.S. stealth fighters and drones and using them on Chinese weapons. AVIC subsidiary has also been sanctioned by the U.S. government for helping Iran develop missiles. The acquired Henniges is a leading producer of anti-vibration components, which is a dual-use technology that can be applied for military use. CFIUS, the U.S. agency responsible for reviewing foreign acquisitions involving sensitive technology, approved the deal in 2015. According to a Chinese investment research firm, BHR Partners has invested in state-owned China General Nuclear Power Corporation, or CGN. The Chinese state-owned company has previously had its staff jailed in America for illegally enlisting U.S. nuclear experts to help China develop its nuclear programs. CGN is also listed by the Pentagon as either owned or controlled by the Chinese military. BHR has also invested in Chinese facial recognition and artificial intelligence company MegaV Technology. The Chinese company was blacklisted by the U.S. in October last year for helping the Chinese regime's surveillance of Uyghur populations in Xinjiang, where an estimated 1 million Uyghurs are being detained in internment camps. The Director of National Intelligence debunked on Monday the idea that Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation. This comes after some have claimed the laptop is part of a smear campaign from Russia.
The Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe, said in an interview with Fox Business that the laptop and emails from Hunter Biden are not a part of a Russian disinformation campaign. This is in response to a comment made by Adam Schiff, the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. He said in an interview with CNN that the claims of the New York Post about Hunter Biden are false and a part of a smear campaign from the Kremlin. Ratcliffe said there was no intelligence that supports the idea that it was a part of a Russian campaign, and that no intelligence was shared with Schiff or anyone from Congress that it was a part of Russian disinformation. Ratcliffe went on to say that his role was in part to make sure that information was not leveraged to forward a certain political narrative, which is what some are trying to do by claiming the laptop is disinformation. New York Post op-ed editor Sohrab Ahmari pushed back on the allegations that the Post's reporting on Hunter Biden's ties to China and Ukraine are fabricated. Ahmari pointed out that neither the former vice president or his son denied the truth or authenticity of the emails in the laptop. New York Post's official Twitter account has been inactive since October 14th. This comes after Twitter refuses to unlock the Post's official Twitter account unless they delete the posts about Hunter Biden's scandal. According to the New York Post, a Twitter representative told them in an email that, quote, "While we've updated the policy, we don't change enforcement retroactively. You will still need to delete the tweets to regain access to your account." On October 19th, Rudy Giuliani said that more is coming out about the Biden family and more money is involved. Christina Kim, NTD News.
The FBI told Congress in a letter on Tuesday that it has nothing to add at this time in response to Ratcliffe's statement that disputed the idea that Russia was behind the discovery of a laptop that may have belonged to Hunter Biden. And two senior administration officials told Fox News on Tuesday the FBI is in possession of the laptop. Now we turn to Hong Kong. New evidence has emerged that the Chinese regime could be supporting the Iranian regime over U.S. sanctions. The U.S. blacklisted 5 Hong Kong companies this Monday. They are accused of helping an Iranian company evade U.S. sanctions. Of the 5 Hong Kong companies, 4 of them are headed by the same Chinese man. Other evidence also indicates these companies are shell companies. That's according to a report by Radio Free Asia. Shell companies are companies without active business operations. Although perfectly legal, they could also be used to hide businesses and assets. This suggests there could be players using these shell companies to support Iran while avoiding U.S. sanctions. Although no additional details are available, the players are most likely tied to the ruling regime, as risking U.S. sanctions could be too high a cost for private companies. A Hong Kong activist says the sanctions mean the U.S. is aware that the Chinese regime knows how to use Hong Kong as an intermediary to cooperate with rogue regimes like Iran. And China has helped Iran against U.S. sanctions in the past. For example, by buying oil or doing other deals. Support from China is critical for the Iranian regime, especially after Washington's crippling financial sanctions this October, which would cut off Iran's access to the global financial system. It's a fatal blow to its already ailing economy. Back to the Hong Kong companies, they are sanctioned for doing business with an Iranian shipping company, which is also blacklisted for allegedly transporting Iran's ballistic missiles. Records show 4 out of the 5 companies have the same CEO, a Shanghai resident named Chen Yong. The man has over 30 companies in Hong Kong. The 4 companies share the same office address in Hong Kong. The Radio Free Asia report says the office is empty, and their calls have been outsourced to a company that provides secretarial services. China may also be imposing sanctions. Under a new law, China will be allowed to ban exports of certain goods and technologies to protect its national security. But is this China's latest tool in its trade and technology war with the U.S., or will it end up harming China itself? We'll be hearing from 2 China experts.
The Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, has passed a new law restricting exports of controlled items to try and fight back on its trade war with the U.S. The law was passed over the weekend and will take effect in December. Under the law, the Chinese regime can take reciprocal measures towards countries that it labels as abusing export controls and threatening its national security. The law will apply to civilian, military, and nuclear products, as well as goods, technologies, and services related to national security. In recent months, the U.S. has blocked Chinese technology firms such as the telecoms giant Huawei, ByteDance's TikTok app, and Tencent's messaging app WeChat, citing a national security threat. Liang Huimin, former director of China's Ministry of Finance, considers this new law from China a symbolic act because no U.S. official would hide their money in China. It means China won't be able to sanction the properties of U.S. officials.
Chinese officials are willing to send their loved ones to America, the so-called enemy to China. They hide their money in the U.S. that they got from corruption. But American officials will unlikely hide their money in China, right? So this law is just a gesture.
China affairs analyst Qin Peng believes the new law wouldn't have the same effect as the U.S. sanctions because all high-tech is originally from the U.S. or its allies.
These technologies that will be restricted exports by China do not constitute a fundamental advantage for the U.S. because they are originally from the U.S. The hardware, industry standards, and the core equipment are all owned by the U.S. or its allies. China only has certain advantages in the application of a small number of technologies.
According to Qin, China's financial sanctions would not have as much effect compared to the U.S. sanctions.
The U.S. can carry out sanctions against Chinese companies because it has unique global financial management weapons, such as SWIFT. They can cut off U.S. dollar transactions for sanctioned companies, and they can also create secondary sanctions, so that the relevant companies and financial institutions dare not help the sanctioned targets.
Qin said the new law will lead to the U.S. strengthening restrictions on technology exports to China. This will accelerate the decoupling of China and the U.S. He said more high-tech companies and supply chains will move out of China. NTD News.
Now we look to Chinese telecoms gear company Huawei. Swedish regulators have banned the use of 5G equipment from China's Huawei and ZTE. They were briefed by the nation's security services, who said China is one of the biggest threats against Sweden.
Sweden's regulators on Tuesday banned the use of telecom equipment from China's Huawei and ZTE in its 5G network, occurring just a month before the country is to auction off its 5G spectrum. The Swedish Post and Telecom Authority PTS said the move follows assessments by the Swedish Armed Forces and Security Service. European governments have been reviewing the role of Chinese telecoms companies. This followed a similar action by the US, citing a potential threat to national security. Chinese companies and citizens must by law aid the Chinese Communist regime in intelligence gathering. Sweden's security service called China one of the biggest threats against Sweden. The ban is likely to benefit rival telecom equipment makers Ericsson, based in Sweden, and Finland's Nokia. PTS has approved the participation of Swedish companies High 3G Access, Net4 Mobility, Telia Sverige, and Terracom. They will tender access to the 3.5 GHz and the 2.3 GHz frequencies, key bands critical for the rollout of 5G. PTS said companies taking part in the auction must remove Huawei and ZTE gear from existing central functions by January 1, 2025.
China responded on Wednesday, saying Sweden should hold an objective and fair view to correct the mistaken decision and avoid a negative impact on the operations of Swedish companies in China. And the U.S. stepped up an offensive on Tuesday to keep China's Huawei technologies out of Brazil's 5G market. During a visit to Brasilia, U.S. officials said Washington has funds available for Brazil to buy equipment from Huawei's rivals. The U.S. urged Brazil to carefully monitor moves by Beijing to expand its influence in the country. Brazil is Latin America's largest economy. The first United Nations big data complex is set to be built in China. It'll provide detailed mapping of everything from topography and infrastructure to human behavior across time zones and around the globe. The officials signing the agreement on behalf of China and the UN were both Chinese.
The United Nations Secretariat in New York has partnered with Beijing to set up joint data hubs. They'll reportedly be based in China. This as the U.S. works to limit data flow to Beijing. According to Hudson Institute researcher Claudia Rosette, plans include a research center for crunching data from UN member states, as well as a geospatial center to further practice China's power on satellite surveillance. The UN's website explains that geospatial information details the whens, wheres, and whys of our world, including all social, economic, and environmental activity. Chinese Communist Party head Xi Jinping promised the big data complex would allow for in-depth mapping of everything from topography and infrastructure to human behavior across time and around the globe. The plan started last year. In June 2019, the head of China's National Bureau of Statistics and the UN Undersecretary General for Economic and Social Affairs signed a memorandum of understanding in Shanghai. It's titled the United Nations National Bureau of Statistics Institute of Big Data. Notably, this particular UN department has been run by China since 2007. So the officials who signed the memorandum on behalf of China and the UN were both Chinese. In September, the department's head announced that the Global Geospatial Knowledge and Innovation Center is in its final stage of approval. Rosette says the Chinese regime has long been deploying advanced tech to control its own people. She adds that the UN badge of legitimacy would make it easier for Beijing to project its techno-tyranny around the world.
Top U.S. universities have been receiving funding from foreign countries, including China, without reporting it to authorities. The received fundings total more than $19 billion by universities such as Stanford, Harvard, and Yale.
In a report released by U.S. Department of Education, or DOE, on Tuesday, top U.S. universities accepted billions of dollars in funding from foreign countries without disclosing it to the DOE. The funding came from countries like China and Chinese companies such as telecom giant Huawei. This includes universities like Stanford, Harvard, and Yale, among others. They received a reported total of almost $20 billion in gifts and contracts over the last 6 years, with Harvard receiving the most from China at well over $100 million. The report only indicated that Cornell University received funding from Huawei at a sum of more than $6 million. Meanwhile, Chinese company HNA offered about $15 million in scholarships to an unnamed U.S. university. The company is involved in aviation and real estate, among other industries, and was founded by a Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, official. The firm's chairman said in a 2018 speech that HNA will consciously safeguard the Communist Party's central authority, with General Secretary Xi Jinping as the core. In 2018, research conducted by the Hoover Institute on China's influence pointed out that Chinese companies can only prosper if they act in favor of the CCP. And the DOE report says that hostile governments are targeting U.S. colleges to steal intellectual property and that foreign funding disclosures are crucial.
The U.S. on Wednesday designated 6 more Chinese media companies as foreign missions, bringing the total number to 15. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said the move was aimed at pushing back against the propaganda from the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP. The outlets can still publish in the U.S. and decide on the content themselves, but Pompeo said consumers will be able to differentiate between news written by a free press and propaganda distributed by the Chinese Communist Party itself. U.S. congressional members introducing 2 bills on Tuesday. Both concern Taiwan. The first is a bundle composed of acts aimed at countering China's threats around the world. Called the China Task Force Act, the bundle is made up of 137 different acts, 7 of which concern Taiwan. 2 of the acts were already passed by the House. House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy said in a statement, "For more than 40 years, we have seen China's ruthless rip in power result in attacks on freedom and human rights around the world. To combat that, the China Task Force released a comprehensive blueprint that will be critical to curbing China's dangerous behavior." He called the act another milestone to hold China accountable. He added in a statement that China's human rights violations should be a bipartisan issue. Representative Michael Waltz said the act will hold China accountable by ending the CCP's espionage and theft from U.S. universities, bringing critical mineral supply chain and jobs back to the U.S., and promoting diversity in STEM to propel the U.S. to the global stage. Now we turn to the issue of live organ harvesting from prisoners of conscience in China. The topic came up at the press briefing to combat trafficking on October 16th. A reporter asked if the U.S. will take action to end the 21 years of persecution against the spiritual discipline Falun Gong in China. That's after the U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and the U.S. Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom, Sam Brownback, both expressed concern for the cause. U.S. Assistant Secretary of State Robert Destro responded, saying he couldn't think of a more horrific human rights abuse than stealing someone's liver. An ambassador at large to monitor and combat trafficking in persons, John Richmond, said the removal of organs is one of the forms of exploitation under the Palermo Protocol, the UN protocol against trafficking in persons. The Palermo Protocols are to prevent, suppress, and punish human traffickers. It's against transnational organized crime, meaning it extends across national borders. Both Destro and Richmond said they will continue to gather relevant information and asked for anyone who has information to step forward. Allegations against the Chinese regime conducting forced live organ harvesting from prisoners of conscience first appeared in 2006. Such prisoners include Falun Gong, Uyghur Muslims, and other political prisoners. The report relies on witnesses who claim first-hand knowledge and investigations by the authors, Canadian MP David Kilgour and human rights lawyer David Mattis. Since then, there's been an influx of reports pointing to the atrocities. An international tribunal in London concluded among the more than 1.5 million detainees in Chinese prisons, some are killed for their organs. Research center China Organ Harvest says China outperforms the rest of the world in organ transplants. This despite having few donations. They cite a decade of research pointing to the systematic killing of prisoners of conscience for their organs. And in Germany, its Chancellor Angela Merkel and her economics minister suggest the country's companies expand their Asian market, avoiding dependence on China. This from their speeches in an event on Monday, organized by the Asia-Pacific Conference of German Business. Merkel said the governments will continue its efforts to help businesses to diversify the Asian market. Her economic minister, Peter Altmaier, said Singapore and South Korea offer good opportunities since they are recovering from the pandemic. He added Germany wants to diversify its supply chains too. As the biggest economy in the European Union, Germany currently sends about 40% of its Asia exports to China. And that's all for today's China in Focus. Thanks for watching and see you next time.